Now I'm back on RTS Serve 1. This is the machine that we used PowerShell to install the DHCP server. I'm going to pull up DHCP here in my administrative tools. And right now, it really has nothing configured. It has no scopes. So I'm going to expand that and expand IP version 4. And you'll notice, if I can drag this bar, under IPv4, no scopes exist. Now, if we were in the GUI, I could certainly click New Scope like we did earlier. But we want to do this through PowerShell. So I'm going to go to my PowerShell. This time I'm going to use PowerShell ISE. I'm going to right-click and go to More and Run as Administrator. Now, this PowerShell ISE, this is very neat. Because DHCP is installed on this server, that means there's a module for DHCP in the list. So I have this DHCP server module I can just click on. These are all the commandlets for DHCP. We ran these top two earlier. Add DHCP server in DC, that was to authorize, and add -DHCP server security group. We use that to create our DHCP admins and DHCP users group. But whatever you want to configure in PowerShell related to DHCP, it's going to be in this list of commands. Well, what I want to do is add an IP version 4 scope. So I have this commandlet, add -DHCP server v4 scope. What's so neat about this, when I click on it and I click show details here, it gives me a form to actually fill in. Now, the first thing you notice about the form, the order is a little weird. It has in range, name, and then start range, then subnet mask. Microsoft breaks this form into sections, and each section is in alphabetical order. So ENS, that's in alphabetical order. Then it starts this other section with activate policies, sim session, computer name. That's in alphabetical order. It just looks weird because you would expect start range to be the first number, then in range would be below, but it's just not laid out that way. So some of these, just you have to pay attention to the order the form is in. I'm going to name this Office B. I'm going to say the start range of addresses is 192.168.1.50 to 192.168.1.254. And for the subnet mask, I'm just going to enter 255.255.255.0. Now, I'm not actually going to use this to assign addresses to anything, so it really does not matter what numbers you actually use. Now, we talked about like delay. If I wanted a delay, I could enter that here. Well, what I'm going to do now is click Insert. This is the entire line of PowerShell syntax. I didn't have to know any syntax to have this created through PowerShell. Add -DHCP server v4 scope, -in range, -name, -start range, -subnet mask, and -delay. What I can do now is hit enter, and it created that. If I were to go back to DHCP, I had no scope initially. Now I'm just going to click refresh. If I open IPv4, you'll see Office B. That scope shows up. If we look at the address pool, ending in 150 to 254. So without knowing any PowerShell syntax, we were easily able to create that using this PowerShell ISE. But it gets even better. Let's say you're doing this in a test environment just to make sure it works. Then you are going to configure this and implement it in production. If I go back to this commands pane here and click copy, what I can do is now open Notepad or any text editor, but Notepad is what I prefer. And I'm just going to paste this in Notepad. Now I'm just going to save it. So I'm going to do File, Save As. I'm going to save it to my desktop. And I'm just going to call it DHCP-scope. Now I'm going to save it as a text file. I don't even need to save it as a PowerShell script. What's possible, Now, if I wanted to truly run that as a script, I could go to File and Open. I can browse to my desktop. And here where it has the extensions, I'm just going to choose text file. And that's it, my DHCP scope. Now, this has already been created, so you can't create the same scope again because it would be a duplicate. But I just now have that syntax here, and I could simply click Run Selection or F8, and it would completely have created that scope for me. So you could save that file in your test environment, copy it to production, run it, and it's going to automate the creation of that script for you. Very user-friendly. Now let's say you want to remove the scope. I can run remove -DHCP server. I love the auto completion. As I'm typing, it is just tailoring this to the exact command. So remove -DHCP server v4 scope. That's what we want. Well, now, when I type dash, it gives me all the things I could type. Now, what I would always think, which is not an option, but I would think there'd be an option for name, and I could type Office B. Can't do that. You have to use scope ID. What's a little tricky about the scope ID, it's just not clear what it is. If you go back to the GUI, nothing says scope ID. So we can run get-DHCP server v4 scope. When I run that, so I'm going to click on line 2, make sure my cursor's on that line, and I'm going to run just that selection. So I'm going to click this icon or press F8. Notice the scope ID is actually really the network ID, 192.168.1.0. So that's the scope I want to remove. I can just go back to line 1, remove -DHCP server v4 scope ID 192.168.1.0. And I'm going to click that run selection, and that scope is gone. Now, if I run get-DHCP server v4 scope again, there is no scope. It's been completely deleted. If we go back to DHCP, well, you can see it's in the interface here. But if we refresh, it's actually truly deleted. So it's really not that different managing this in PowerShell compared to managing this in the GUI.